Hello, hypno hacking community. This is a special edition of the occasional interviews that you've come to expect here. We've had Walter Kern come through, we've had other people come through, Joshua Lysek, and this is a conversation that I have been wanting to have for many, many, many months. I'm thrilled to have Michael Malice join us for a bit of a conversation. Michael, I had tried to write up sort of an intro, like how do you intro Michael Malice? And I realized it's nearly as difficult as if I were trying to intro someone like Joe Rogan before he became podcast famous. Because how do you intro Joe Rogan? What's he do? Well, it's a stand-up comic. Wait, no, fight commentator. Wait, the Fear Factor guy. And with you,
Yeah.
it's like author, podcaster, internet presence. Geez. So I decided that just for entertainment value, I would just go see what Wikipedia had to say. Let
Oh,
Wikipedia be
no,
the
no, I don't
intro.
want to do that. So the Wikipedia is grossly inaccurate from the first sentence. So I
I,
really don't want to do this.
but the first sentence is what made me laugh. That Michael Malice is a Ukrainian American internet
Yeah, I'm
troll,
not
author,
Ukrainian
and
American.
podcaster.
I'm not because I don't speak Ukrainian. I was born in Ukraine, but people who are Jewish in Ukraine, Soviet Union at the time, don't consider themselves Ukrainian. And in fact, Ukrainians would not consider me Ukrainian either. So this is some weird identity politics that got smuggled into Wikipedia. I don't know what my name in Ukrainian would be. I've never heard a sentence of it.
This is some interesting lore. I was focused more on the fact that they went with internet troll before author and before podcaster, and I wasn't sure if that would be pleasing to you or upsetting.
Um, I think all that's accurate. I think I'm more known as a troll than I am as a podcaster.
Okay, fair enough. I think I would want to just personally, I've written a couple of books myself. I think I would want to have been known as an author before troll or even podcaster, but
I think I'm more higher in the ranks of trolling than I am in the ranks of authordom.
fair enough. So, what's interesting about, yeah, I think for my audience in particular, they're interested in persuasion, they're interested in hypnosis. There's a lot of crossover with, the Scott Adams crowd. And you and I would both share that in common. We both loved his work. So it occurs to me that there's actually a ton of overlap in comedy, trolling, which we might call some offshoot of comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and then to the hypnosis slash persuasion side of things. So let's just take it apart little by little. And I did mean to give you a bit better of an intro. Michael Malice is the author of Dear Reader and The New Right and The White Pill and lately Unwanted, a tall tale of the Old West and the New Wave. So maybe we can talk a little bit about some of that in a bit. You're very busy in many different domains, which is very interesting. So one major area of overlap is I always say don't ever take a hypnotist or a persuasionist at face value. And the same seems to be very true of an internet troll. We'd see this with you kind of making a face like, hmm. So with like Scott Adams, for example, you would notice this all the time. He might put something out there,
Sure.
on
Yes.
Twitter or say something on his show, and then you get all the people that latch on, like, you can't possibly believe. And I go, no, you have to understand that he's doing a thing. He's trying to move the needle a certain way. Same thing of trolling.
I don't know that that's. I think a dissimilarity because I think a lot of times something I resent is when people will accuse me of saying something I don't believe for engagement farming and I think I tend to be, at least from my perspective, and of course everyone's going to perceive it differently. It's pretty clear when I'm being tongue in cheek and when I'm just stating something that is a view. And I think the issue I have is, and I'm sure you understand this perfectly well, if people's interested in persuasion, a huge majority of people are incapable of empathy, meaning they are incapable of seeing things from other points of view, even as a hypothesis. So if I have a perspective on an issue that they disagree with, and they are of the belief, correctly or incorrectly, that I'm intelligent, therefore I must be joking, or you can't really believe that, or so on and so forth. So it's just interesting to me to some extent to what extent people are uh, uh, how they perceive information. And this engagement farming is a really interesting, very current accusation. If anything, I'm disengagement farming because I try to do what I can to alienate people I don't like from my space. Because one of the reasons I became an author wasn't because I particularly want to write books. It's because I didn't want to have an alarm clock. I didn't want to have a boss. I didn't want to ever have to engage in small talk, and I didn't want to ever have to interact with someone I didn't want to, which is a quality not even the president has. And that's kind of been taken away from me, the last one, by social media. So I am very often do put things that I know some people find off-putting. One of the reasons I often dress up in costumes on different programs, I think it's important for me to remind the people at home, this is a show. You're looking at a screen. You're not looking out your window. This is edited, or people are at least being heightened version themselves, not insincere, but to some extent performative. You don't know either of these people. And that's a big reminder to them, wearing a costume, that this is not your house that you're looking at. Most people cannot make that distinction. And for many others, they're like, I can't listen to anything this guy says. He's got face paint on. Great. Like, your terms are acceptable. I listen with my ears, but if you're listening with your eyes, that's perfectly fine. Goodbye. So that's kind of, I think, where I stand on some of the stuff you mentioned.
Okay. I was just reading an article that you'd written. I've already forgotten the name of the magazine that it was for, the internet site that it was for, but it was back from like 2016. You were talking about trolling in particular and sort of defining it as saying, well, that's a term that's been taken away from us in some ways, that, now it just means I say things people don't like, or whatever. Yeah. But you were sort of defining it as trying to, in a sense, turn the target into the entertainment, that you say something
right.
that people are going to take the wrong way, and it's for your own amusement. It's for your own entertainment.
Yeah. So the official motto of trolling is, you're either going to have fun with me or you're going to be fun for me. So I will say something like, no one wants to say that Erica Kirk killed George Floyd. And that's a true factual statement. And of course, people bite, but they don't want to say because it's not true. Yeah. Okay. So seeing those reactions from a statement that is literally and factually true, and true in every sense, is a good example of trolling.
Also a great example of how persuasion works, because as a hypnotist, and I do serious work with clients, but like on the persuasion side, especially if I'm working with a business client, and I'm constantly talking about, the order of words matter.
Oh, yeah. You have to end on the joke. You have to end on the funny word. Yep. I reword my tweets all the time.
So you do that. You do.
Oh, yes.
Skipping a little bit ahead in the conversation, but yes, just simply inserting. How did you start that? No one wants to believe, or no one wants to hear that Erica Kirk didn't kill. Just that simple.
Yeah.
No one wants to say 3 or 4 words, and suddenly it's like, how? You've just changed the way someone's brain operates.
And also, you're ending on the joke.
Yes. Do people make it that far anymore? Do they get to the punchline these
days? Yeah, judging from the reactions, most certainly, yes.
I'm going to have to look at the notes here, because I think...
And actually, it's to the point I also want to make clear. When I say something, because of Poe's law, which says it's hard to distinguish between what's satire and what's stupidity on the internet, if I say something that I can imagine someone plausibly saying, I will often precede it with, the following tweet will be a troll, because I don't want later to people to think on those that I'm backpedaling. So on a few of them, I really do have to call it out, because I'm like, I'm going to get accused of actually believing this.
Okay. No, I've seen that sequence before. I'll see, because, Twitter does all sorts of weird things with the timeline. It's not always perfectly sequential. I'll just see Michael Malice says the following tweet, and then I have to go to the timeline, which is another thing you have to remember in this information age. I don't know if you recall, gosh, was it last year? I think it was last year, during the initial strike on Iran, back in like June, maybe. The Babylon Bee attempted to do a sequential joke, where like the one side was, they were sort of making fun of people that are pro-Israel, and then immediately the one that followed it was making fun of people that are pro-Palestine. But if you didn't see those back to back, it was not at all apparent that they were doing the joke. And geez, you have to remember, like, sequence is real.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I think we again, to the lack of empathy thing, people tend to assume that others receive and perceive information the same way that you do. Me, not meaning you, meaning whoever listening, and it's not true at all. And that's something I've been fighting against very heavily in the last few months.
So that brings up one of the areas of cognition that I notice. You talk about this, and it's interesting to me to see that that's a thing that somebody notices. And a quote that you often will post: "Stupid people process language in different ways, not merely in worse or slower ways."
Right.
I would love to hear some elaboration, because I've seen it, and I've seen the screenshots that you'll throw, and you'll kind of give the teaser and say, "Can you tell exactly where this went off the rails?" Very interesting from the angle on persuasion, from hypnosis, the injection of words, and what Robert Cialdini calls the click-run response of the human brain.
Oh, I called them mousetraps. That's interesting. Okay, he had the same metaphor. Okay.
Okay. Yep. Click run. In hypnosis, we would just say automated response, subconscious response. But there are certain things that are absolutely coded in there. Cialdini was one of his first examples of that is simply inserting the word "because" after a request automatically increases your chances of compliance by about 30, 40, 50%. Just adding the word "because," and they demonstrated through the tests that
makes perfect sense.
The reason doesn't have to be a reason.
Right.
You could say anything after this, but they heard "because," click run, mousetrap, so you go. I want to hear more about this, though, the way people process language. And when did you first start kind of noticing that and decide, hey, I'm going to camp out on that for a little bit?
The light bulb moment for me, I was doing I was doing an event. I was one of the speakers. There was another girl who was one of the speakers. She's one of these like Jezebel type writers. I think her name was Anna. I don't remember. And we're talking. And the thing that's fascinating, by the way, about this is when I've told this story to people, when they start backfilling the other information to make it make sense in their context. It's like, when a human being tells another human being the story, they are not and cannot give you the entirety of the information. They're only giving you the information that is germane. So when they start saying, what if this, what if that, like, so I'll hear, well, maybe she didn't hear you correctly. It's like, if that were the case, I would have included that in my analysis. Here was the analysis. Me and her sitting at a bar, and but it was literally a reading series in a bar. So it's not like a loud bar noise. And I'm introducing myself and like, blah, blah. And I'm like, that Harvey Pekar had wrote a book about me. And she's like, oh, I thought he wrote about himself. He had. I was the first person who wrote a book about someone else. And she goes, isn't he dead? And he goes, yeah, he passed away in 2010. And her boyfriend sits down. This is within 5 minutes. And she goes, this is Michael. Harvey Pekar died, and then Michael wrote a book about him. So she had the nouns and verbs all there, and her scrambled egg brains rearranged them. I saw this with my buddy Tom Woods, who's a very failed podcaster. On his Twitter bio, it says a bunch of stuff, New York Times bestselling author. And I saw someone yell at him on Twitter, well, you write for the New York Times, so blah, 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 blah. And what I want, people don't tend to interact with those of significantly different intelligence levels, even in your job. Certainly not on a level of, back and forth exchange of ideas. Usually, I'm saying usually. And when you look at stupid people, you think of Joey on Friends or Suzanne Summers on Three's Company. I'm dating myself. And those characters say funny things. And we think that dumb people know fewer facts, like they don't know how many weeks are in a year, or that if you have to explain to them, Betty White on The Golden Girls, for example, she's on a date and the date's ending. He walks her to the door and he goes, I had a great time. I'll give you a ring. And she goes, I can't accept jewelry. He goes, no, I'll call you. And she's blank stare on the phone, blank stare. And the phone will ring. Oh, so it's humorous in that regard. But what happens is in real life, they will take those nouns and verbs like a bowl of alphabet soup, rearrange them, and hear something you didn't say. And not only that, when you reply to them, they will accuse you of backpedaling, or that's what you meant. Because I'm sure you know this as a hypnotist, a human being's visceral perception is like stone in the minds of many people, and you're not going to get them to get out of that first visceral reaction without a lot of work, because that's as real as, you know, the nose on your face. And it just happened to me this morning where some dimwit was arguing with me about how Edward Hopper is not a modernist, and this person, you know, is a modernist, and his reasoning was basically that Hopper was good and this other guy was bad. I go, yeah, I get it. I said to him, modernism is what you like, not modern is what you don't. And he replies, I don't dislike modernism. I was accusing him of liking modernism in writing, and immediately he just reversed it. So that sort of thing, I think, can be frustrating for many people, because they also believe that if you keep talking at someone, they'll get what you're saying. And for many people, they will never get what you're saying because they are wired differently than you. It's not that you're not being articulate, it's that they are functionally deaf.
And you said it right. It really is something that I work with in hypnosis and in persuasion, generally speaking. And Scott Adams always said this too. We're not rational people. That's the mistake that people think of, like, well, if I just explain this further, if I just bring more facts and more logic to it, you'll get it. But you said it right. So there's like an anchor is the word that we would use in hypnosis. You said stone, I think, or a rock that settles. There's an anchor that happens because of a visceral reaction, and you can't get past that point. I don't know how many Wikipedia links you throw at them or graphs or charts or whatever, you're not going to move that. And so in persuasion, I say, this is why you have to go for the emotional push to get them out of that. You have to say something more ridiculous at an emotional level. And was it back in December or January? I get my dates confused, when there was the whole thing of ICE was in Minneapolis rather. And, they shot a woman in a car, right, or an SUV, because she was allegedly going to hit one of the officers. And so you got to see this whole thing unfold of, I've seen the video. No, I've seen the video. No, look at this. No, look at that. And we're going back and forth with facts and logic to, you know, prove out whichever side. And I said, the only way you're going to break that is to come back with a response and say, thank God she didn't kill 28 more people. Because now I'm definitely not operating on the level of logic by saying that. But I'm going to move the other person a little bit from the emotional level to, like, get you out of this part, right? So this is maybe where I wanted to settle in a little bit, because you talk about it from a standpoint of, you know, you say the dim-witted, the cretins, the stupid people. Is it intelligence, or is it just these bizarre inborn sort of, we talked about click run and mousetraps and so on?
It's intelligence, in my opinion. And by intelligence, I mean the capacity to receive and process new information. So there's many people who are maybe high IQ or do have high powered jobs. You cannot talk to them or talk at them. They're not going to hear you. And there's nothing you can say or do. Or maybe there is. This is where you would come in. Nothing I could say or do, or be interested, frankly, in saying or doing, that's going to bring them around. They're not hearing you. And I think intelligent people, when they are having a disagreement and they're proven wrong, are glad, because they're therefore closer to truth. But unintelligent people, for whom their views are often their identity or their ego, have to really dig in their heels, because they think, if I'm wrong on this, people are going to think I'm stupid, or I'm going to have to wonder if I'm as smart as I say I am, and all sorts of emotions follow suit. I made this point at Scott Adams Memorial, which I had the huge honor of speaking at. I said, if you hear a smart person saying something dumb, I don't say you, but I don't think, oh, they're dumb. I think, oh, it's a smart person who said a dumb thing. Maybe it's me. Or why did this smart person say this dumb thing? But midwits, which is a term I'm very proud to have popularized, people are marginally intelligent, whose intelligence will never be regarded, or almost never, as impressive. They really have to hold on to that presentation of being smart, and they cannot process the idea that the smartest people on earth are ignorant of 99.9% of knowledge. And what the smartest person on earth can talk to somebody else about their field of expertise and be a complete ignoramus, if not a buffoon. And that still doesn't mean they're not the smartest person on the earth. It just means that their brain works faster and better, and they're really good at the thing that they're good at, and they know enough to sit down and shut up, when they don't know what they're talking about. And also, if they don't know what they're talking about and it's proven, they'll say, "Oh, thank you. Okay, now I understand better."
Interesting. Interesting. I don't have the facts and the data, and it wouldn't matter if I did, because as we just said, that's usually not the shifting point anyway. But I'm on the sort of lifelong quest to demonstrate that, as Scott Adams often said too, it seems like the highest IQ people are often the ones that are most difficult to, persuade to a different opinion, because the way that facts and logic work, when you're smarter about something, that can be a way of sort of locking yourself into something that you already have decided long ago through a feeling. That's what I believe.
I strongly disagree. I think the window are the midwits, which is people one standard deviation above the norm of 115 IQ. So like 107 to 130, those are the difficult ones. Really smart people. I think this is F. Scott Fitzgerald or Upton Sinclair, one of those writers, made the point that I don't remember the exact quote, the mark of a quality mind is to be able to hold more than one opinion at once and to grapple with ideas that you don't agree with, but like let's walk through this to see what it looks like. So I think really smart people it's easy for them if I'm like, okay, let's imagine a population, and what if everyone had wings instead of arms? What would that look like? They'd be happy to live in that world and walk through it. And if you say, I want to have a society where, drinking a beer is mandatory, the mid would roll their eyes and be like, that's stupid. The smart person would have the fun of like, okay, how would this play out? Like, well, orange juice prices would go down. Like, how would it affect the medical industry? How would it affect politics? Are more Irish people going to get elected? Like, you could have fun with it. So I think smart people enjoy playing with ideas, but marginally smart people are threatened by ideas because their ego and their perception and presentation is very tied in with this idea of presenting as smart. This is why they're big grammar Nazis. So they're very good at understanding rules. They're incapable, I'm using that word literally, incapable understanding context or what service these rules were implemented for and when those rules should be discarded.
You're touching on another major sort of crossover there with the world of hypnosis and persuasion, which is the problem of imagination.
Sure.
And that seems to be something that I'd have to look to see if there's any correlation between high IQ and the ability to have a better imagination than lower IQ people. But that's absolutely what you're talking about when somebody says, hey, we should have a law making beer drinking mandatory. My imagination can kick in, like you said, and go, oh, okay, well, in that imaginary world, would the Irish win more elections? Would people get into more car crashes? So, like, I can exercise my imagination better. And that's really the whole world of hypnosis anyway, is getting people into a different imaginative state. Now, imagine you're better at this. Imagine that you don't have these hangups or whatever. And that can often unlock, sort of the conscious mind part of it. But as we're on this topic of the triggers, the mousetraps, the click run responses, there's another thing that you said and have said many, many, many times. I had to go all the way back to December of 2023 to find where I think you first posted it. This is a quote that made it into my book, Demonetize Your Mind, because I thought this is a whole chapter's worth of material here, which is simply this. The average human doesn't process information through a true false filter, but through an us them filter. And that's another one of those, like, yes, you are touching on a mousetrap or an auto response. It's a bias. It's a cognitive bias. I'm fond of saying that if you went through a list of every single cognitive bias or implicit bias, whichever it might be, confirmation bias, recency bias, the availability heuristic, every single one of those, if you flip the coin over, those are persuasion techniques because they're all sitting there just ripe for the taking. So you can imagine why that quote would have made it into a book like Demonetize Your Mind. But so December 23, I see the first is maybe the first time you talked about it. But again, where does this for you, where did that first kind of pop up and you noticed and went, oh, okay, it's a social proof thing?
The first time I noticed it in practice, I wouldn't call it social proof. The first time I noticed it in practice, it was the most disturbing TV interview I ever saw. Dennis Prager, so this was in the 90s, I believe, had a late night like chat show. It was just him and a guest, just the interview show. And there was a guest who was an attorney who was suing tobacco companies, right? And the argument was, you gave my client cancer, now you should, pay millions of dollars. So this kind of this backdoor way to ban cigarettes. And Prager goes, okay, what's wrong with the idea? I'm paraphrasing again. This is like 30 years later. What's
Sure.
wrong with the idea of you have the warning label, the person knows the risks, they still think the risks are worth it, and they're going to choose to smoke. And the guy goes, "Yep, that's what the cigarette companies say." And Dennis Prager goes, "Right. So what's wrong with that?" And the lawyer, and if you're a lawyer, I need to tell you, anyone listening to this, your job is to present your client. Your job is not, you're not only taking clients you agree with, you're taking clients you know sometimes are wrong, or so on and so forth. And the lawyer was like, "Yeah, like that's how they talk." And Dennis is like, "What's wrong with that?" He goes, "Oh, like, are you working with them?" He's like, "No, but like, how would you rebut that?" And the guy at one point threatened to walk off. And Dennis was completely bewildered because these are 101 questions. I at home was like, I'm seeing something terrifying. And this was such an example of you sound like them, the end, because
Oh,
they are
wow.
bad, we're good. Anything they say is wrong. What else do I need to, why are we even having this conversation? It's a waste of time. And it was very chilling. It's one of those moments where it's still stuck with me decades later.
And you made a little pre-comment there and said I wouldn't call it social proof.
Well, social proof, my understanding of that term is a element that demonstrates your status. So, whereas this, what I'm talking about, us them filter, is something internal.
I could call it tribalism, maybe if
Yeah,
that's the
sure,
same
sure. But I thought
kind
a
of
social proof is
concept.
you have to prove yourself to somebody else. This is something
Yeah.
entirely internal.
Yeah, social proof is maybe not the right term. Maybe I should have used something
Tribalism,
different.
yes, sure.
It's sort of an offshoot in social proof that, like I want to be like that person. That's one of me. I want to be that. That's but it's attached to, okay, that person uses that product, so I will as well. I've noticed that there are little offshoots of this though. That building sense of tribalism, it starts at a very basic, maybe politics or maybe it's religion or whatever it might be. But then we have been watching this sort of weird splintering in the ranks of different, whether it's on the left or the right. I think, frankly, it's all kind of splintering. And
Yes,
so you get this like sort of micro version of that where,
yes.
let's say, I like Michael Malice. I like your content and it's a lot of fun and this and that. And I like your shows until you have somebody on your show that I don't like. And it doesn't even have to be like a politically different side or religiously different side, but like, oh, you've associated with them. And so now I have to make a decision as to whether I still like you based
No,
on
no, 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 no,
probably
no,
not.
no, 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 no. I have to decide if I still trust you because I thought we were on the same team, and now
Mhm.
you're letting them into our house. So I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. So it's not even about liking; it's about like they regard it as breaching the moat.
That's a great metaphor, actually. I like that. Yeah, the trust is a huge part of it. Yes.
And it's also
I
like,
don't
what are you
know.
trusting? I don't need your power of attorney. I don't need your mother's maiden name. I have a show. I run my mouth, and the other guy runs my mouth. And if something I say sounds wrong to you, please, or to anyone on your screen, look it up and check for yourself. Because many times they're just innocently good at making mistakes because we're speaking off the cuff.
Oh,
I bet you
oh,
that quote,
oh.
maybe it wasn't Fitzgerald that I said earlier, maybe, or even Upton Sinclair, maybe it was Hemingway, who knows? Point being, but the thing is also then, if someone you don't like, they are paid off or they are
Hmm.
sinister or so on and so forth, especially if they're smart, then you really know that they're running cover for the bad people, whoever those might happen to be.
Well, but you understand, of course, that you just said, yeah, hey, if I'm wrong, call me out. It's never a question of whether you're wrong. I'm not following you because you're right or you're wrong. I've outsourced my thinking to you see, because you've got it right on enough topics that I already agreed with
Right.
that at some point I've surrendered the intellect to, okay, I'm following Malice or I'm following who, fill in the name. I don't really care. Dan Bongino or Joe Rogan
Right.
or whoever. Like, okay, I can turn off my brain and that trust factor comes in. Whatever you say is okay. And that's
Right.
the jarring moments of how dare you have this other person that I definitely don't agree with. So now I have to like turn on the engine again and wonder, can I trust what you say is true? Maybe that's the first time I've interacted with intellectually with you, in months because I shut it off.
Right. And then I have to then they break then I am sure maybe you've had, I don't know if you have, I get people break up with me all the time. And I used to like you, and then this, and now I'm like, and I reply to them, I go, you're breaking up with someone who is not aware of your existence, and you laugh. I don't find it funny at all, in the sense that every single time this happens, I find it very disturbing, because it's like,
Yes.
it's, you know what? There's bands that you like and I like and everyone listening to this like, and this album is better than the other album. And at no point am I taking it personally. Or there's some show, maybe he used to talk about politics and now he's talking more about health. And you know what? I'd rather he talked about politics. I'm not going to listen anymore. But this kind of relationship where they take it personally, to me, every single time, I'm really thrown.
It's only funny to me in a horrifying sort of way because it's just
Sure.
been cycled over and over and over again. There's a psychological term for this idea of the one-way relationship, but
Parasocial.
if the parasocial, and we talked a lot, my audience and I talked a lot about this after Scott Adams passed away, and saying like I think there might be a little bit of a different thing going on there, even though there's definitely that parasocial sort of thing. Like I didn't know him, he didn't know me, but it matters to me because he felt like the internet dad or whatever. I said he may be one of the few people that actually, because he was a hypnotist and had the game Persuasion going, knew how to make a much deeper connection with the audience. Doesn't mean that it was any more real two-way, but it felt a lot more real.
I'll give you several examples of this. There were a few jokes I had for Scott Adams Memorial. Scott Adams being a humorist, and a humorist, even if they don't like a joke themselves, can appreciate this person's going for a joke, where I bit my tongue because I know people in the audience would have said, "How dare you? This is disrespectful." Scott, my good friend Scott, who I've never met, my good friend Scott would be so offended. And I am positive, though I can't prove, that Scott at worst would roll his eyes if I said Scott's in heaven doing what he liked best, avoiding black people. Why was Dilbert a black and white comic strip? Because Scott wasn't into the colored ones. They would have been, and I talked to his ex-wife who organized it, and she's like, you're like, Scott would have liked this, but at the same time, you know how these people would react. The most extreme example of this, I was on Timcast with Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr, that delicate, shy, soft-spoken, demure woman. And I'm cracking jokes with her, and people like, how could he talk to her like that? He's so disrespectful. And I'm sitting there like, do you think Roseanne Barr can't hold her own if someone is roasting her? Of all people on earth, is there anyone more capable of cutting you down to size with 2 seconds of her tongue? But because, and that speaks to the lack of empathy, because they would never talk to her like that correctly, and because they wouldn't be able to land the joke with her from their perspective, oh my God, you see how she's laughing her laugh? Ha ha ha. She's just humoring you. And it's like, if there's one thing Roseanne likes to do, it's be a phony to make other people happy. That's really her shtick. And every single, and I've had to be aware of these kind of parasocial relationships, because it is consistent and consistently annoying. And you can never tell them otherwise.
Boy,
because they know her. They know her better than I know.
Yes.
I've seen every episode of her show. I know her.
I know her. I've seen a lot of interviews.
Yeah,
I've heard
I
some
know
of the
her.
private thoughts. Yeah, no, it's
And she's a good person, and I'm a good person, so therefore she thinks like I would think. This is one of the reasons I hate the golden rule, because it's an attack on empathy. It's the idea of like, well, if I wouldn't like it, therefore nobody else would like it. Bullshit.
ooh, that's a great distinction.
It is.
It's a great distinction.
It's a completely inane and narcissistic principle people live by.
Well, it cuts to that whole question of imagination again. You
Sure.
call it empathy, and maybe it's an imagination problem, but I can't imagine that you wouldn't like or would like, or to go a mile in your shoes, as they say. But you're talking about wanting to utter a couple of jokes at Scott Adams Memorial, and deciding not to for the sake of perhaps the public and the way they might react.
Right.
And I have a couple of things to say about that, because number one, this is going to go back to our thing about, does it matter whether you're intelligent or not? But number one, those jokes have to be they have to be intelligent. They have to be well crafted. There is some crossover between IQ and the ability to write comedy
Sure.
or do persuasion. I'm fond of saying that comedy is nuclear persuasion. Nobody can
Yes.
do a reframe faster than a comedian and get an entire group of people laughing at something they should never be laughing at, except that you can execute the reframe and change reality for them very, very quickly. So the two you just mentioned, about Scott Adams, I think that's very well put together because there's a certain hypnotic ambiguity to it. You have to kind of fill in the blanks and go, wait, what is that referring to? Oh, right. And you've reframed it in a different context. Of course, his thing with comics would have nothing to do with, racial views or anything like that. And so it's interesting to me that you would hold back on a joke like that because you'd say the audience may not, maybe appreciate it. And it's probably context too. But then we have one of my all-time favorites from you, which is when Malcolm Jamal Warner died. And it was either that same day. Yeah, you're already like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It was either that day or the next day that you posted. We were told that the Cosby Show was about fighting racist stereotypes. Okay. So I want to say a couple of things about
Wait,
that.
can we say, I was making one point?
Yes, please.
There are people who think those two Scott Adams jokes weren't funny and they're entitled to their opinion. But plenty of people say I'm bad at math. No one ever says I don't have a good sense of humor. Now, sometimes it's the joke and that joke is not funny. But I would ask those people, have you ever encountered a joke that you don't think is funny, but you acknowledge is funny? And that will make no sense to them because they have no internal, they don't look inward. So their opinion and reality is completely indistinguishable for them.
Yeah, boy, we're touching on like so many different trails that we could go down there. And so the one thing that
the reason I laughed with the Malcolm Jamal Warner is because one of the Hoteps, which are this like a right of center black nationalist group, which I have very fond affection for. I was the first person to have Hotep Jesus on his show. One of them got ass mad and called me a racist and blocked me after that. So that's why I was laughing.
Really?
Yes. I'm like, oh, wow. Really? This is your line, Malcolm Jamal Warner's death?
I appreciate
it. He didn't die on the Cosby Show. I mean, just, you know what I mean?
That's the thing is like, again, maybe it's just a level of intelligence in being able to write comedy because I can dissect that. And I used to write jokes. I've always thought like I should try the comedy thing on stage, except I never ever will. There's too much of a distinction between writing it and then trying to go deliver 5 minutes worth of a set.
Yes.
But I saw that post and I was like, that is the closest thing to what I would say, quote unquote, a professional joke that I've seen since Anthony Jeselnik used to do this on the regular back in like 2016 or 17. That was his whole shtick. Like he'd wait for some tragedy and then boom, like right out there in the famous Boston Marathon joke about there's some lines you don't cross.
Yeah.
And like it just draws in, it fascinates me from the, standpoint of, again, going hypnosis, persuasion. Hypnosis very much operates on an ambiguity level. I'm not going to come right out and say, here's what you're going to envision. I'll just suggest and let you fill in the blanks. And President Trump is great at that. And Scott Adams was great at that and all of this. So you didn't say anything except Cosby Show and racist stereotypes. And the audience has to kind of fill in, like, what's that all about? Same thing with Boston Marathon, finish line, lines you don't cross, so it's that thing. But ultimately what I'm getting at here is, why would you post that, but then not say the joke at Scott Adams Memorial?
Because I am an anarchist, and part of being an anarchist is recognizing whose space you're in, and that wasn't my house. So if I'm in somebody else's house, I'm going to be deferential to their rules, and I'm going to do what I can to make my presence an asset and not a cost. And I didn't want to have them who organized it have to hear from his fans, some of them, and then have to then those fans are going to be like, oh, I thought you were on the level. You were Scott's friend. You organized a memorial. And now you have this guy taking a dump on his urn. I thought I could trust you. So it's exactly avoiding what we just talked about earlier.
Wow. I'm really glad to hear you say that. I mean, we have been hinting at this the entire time. We've been talking explicitly about imagination and empathy and, understanding these contexts of like, yeah, it's a funny joke, but not in this context, not at this precise, sort of thing. And maybe there is a misconception, certainly about what anarchism means, certainly about what trolling means, to say that this must be somebody who will say the absolute worst possible thing at any given moment, anytime, doesn't matter, burn it all to the ground, baby. So that's a great call out, and I'm glad you said it.
Okay. You are welcome.
All right, we'll end it there because I know I've kind of used up the 45 minutes that I said I would take you on this journey. But we'll end it with this. You're wearing the shirt. You're welcome.
Yes, I just
And
recorded an episode of my show. Yeah.
oh, did you? That's nice. So yeah, I thought about starting this one with saying, "Let that be your."
By the
welcome for
way,
the
that's
next.
funny you said that because that's my new way on Twitter of saying F you. People have this paragraph arguing with me. I just go, that's nice. It's my code for I hope you hang yourself.
All right. As we wind this down,
That's nice.
that's nice. That's great. I would like the origin story on the title of the show. I know you're very proud of the fact that it's in all caps and unnecessary quotes, and
Yes.
it's one of those things that certainly caught me the first time I saw it. It's just it's a mousetrap. It was like idiot spelled it wrong. But then you got to think like, no, probably not. It's a professional. Like Joshua Lasik used to catch me out on this stuff all the time. He would post something and have the wrong spelling of a word, and I'd stop and go, Joshua, what are you? Wait a minute. No, he's doing that to. It's what Scott Adams called the intentional wrongness that will
Yes.
attract attention to it. And I thought, well, that's just got to be the most epic troll I've ever seen, to label your show and be like, every week people are going to see this title. So where does this come from, and how long did it take you to put that together? Or was it like a spur of the moment? Oh, that's a great title.
There's a girl named Eliza Orleans who I am friends with, who was on Survivor a couple of times, and now she was a public defender, and now she's a leftist commentator about the law. And Eliza, if you go back at her tweets, would always dunk on people who misspelled your. She'd put apostrophe Y-O-U-R. So then I started doing that incorrectly on purpose, and then I added the incorrectness. I made all caps, and then I added quotes for no reason. And there's a very famous meme, which is a bell curve, and you have the caveman idiot on the left. Then you have the guy with the glasses who perceives himself as smart in the center, the top of the bell curve. And then you have someone like a wizard robe at the right. And the moron and the genius think the same thing. And the guy in the middle is throwing out squid ink to try to evade a basic truth. So the moron will spell "you're welcome" incorrectly, right? The smart person will be proud of themselves for realizing Y-O-U apostrophe R-E is the term. But this brilliant person, or at least someone who actually knows grammar, will know a show title is a proper noun and therefore cannot be misspelled. So if my name Michael was spelled with 3 L's and you spelled it with 1 L, you would be incorrect because it is correctly spelled with 3 L's. So in and of itself, a show title cannot definitionally be misspelled. Second, the phrase is taken out of any context. So they're like, oh, shouldn't it be, you mean "you're welcome"? And I always say, no, this is "you're welcome to embarrass yourself in public." And because Midwits know rules and apply them, but do not understand context, what I just said makes sense to you and you could see the mistake, they still will double down and not get that it is in fact spelled correctly. And the very first thing on my show, I say, hi, my name is Michael Malice. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. So I open with the usage that is perfectly grammatically coherent, that anyone can wrap their heads around. This isn't some weird like wordplay. And they'll still insist because, again, they are smart enough to know what the rules are, and they perceive themselves, often correctly, as understand these rules as symbols of intelligence, but they're not symbols of particularly great intelligence in the same way that someone who's 6 foot is taller than average, but the circumstances in which that person's height will be remarkable are almost never.
Well, I think it's one of the at so many levels, it's one of the best show titles I've ever come
I'm
across.
so proud of it, and it's paid such dividends.
And you should be, because not only does
oh wait,
it,
here's the other one. I'm sorry, there's one more.
Yeah, good.
After it's been explained to people, they will double down and say he screwed it up and now he's backpedaling.
Of course, it's
because their perception came chronologically first, so therefore it's more likely to be true. So the order of events in their head is the order of events that must happen in reality. Like it's sometimes I've heard this happen to me, it's happened to you. You'll hear a cover song first, and then you'll hear the original later, and you'll think the original is the cover. It's like, no, you moron, you just heard the original second. But in your head, it came later.
and then still like the cover better because I'm sorry, Jimi Hendrix did a better job with it than Bob Dylan. So I'm just going to stick with that.
I don't listen to music from that era, but The Tide is High is a cover, and that's a very obvious better cover than the Crystals.
Well,
And Venus by Bananarama.
Bob Dylan did many songs that I think were covered far better later on.
Oh, I don't think he would deny that. Isn't that very known that he's more of a songwriter than performer in many ways?
I think so. I think so. But you're talking about this chronological thing.
Yes,
Like,
of
there's
course,
no way that Bob Dylan didn't do a cover of All Along the Watchtower. That's Jimi Hendrix. That's his song. But no, it's not.
Oh, Bob Dylan wrote that song?
Bob Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower.
That's such a perfect example.
Yep. Hendrix made it famous.
So. Yeah.
But yeah, back to that show.
Oh, one more thing. This is really funny.
You were going to let me give you the compliment on the show.
I don't need it. It's fine. Dolly Parton went to Whitney Houston, and Dolly Parton wrote "I Will Always Love You," right? Mm-hmm. And Whitney Houston, I think it was the biggest song of the year. That song, those of us old enough remember, they played it every other minute. You know, it is a great song and a classic. Even at the time you hear it, it gave you chills. And Dolly said to her, "Let's do a duet." And Whitney said, "You wrote it, but I made it a hit." Whitney's dead, and Dolly's getting the residuals. So.
And those things are connected in some way.
Yeah. Is that horrible?
That is horrible.
I hope I really am pretty sure it's true, but even if it's not, it's still a great story.
Yeah. So now it becomes true because it's a great story, and you wouldn't want to take that away from anybody.
Because people are interested, people are narrative-seeking creatures and not truth-seeking creatures. So if something sounds novel, and this is why I love the conspiracy stuff online, if it sounds like a good story, you're more likely to believe it, even though the truth is often far more boring.
I have a whole other theory on conspiracy theories, but I won't bore you with that now. You'll have to just wait for my next book, because I think I'm just going to do an entire book about this concept of that. If you can get somebody to follow you on a Sherlock Holmes rabbit trail hunt, like a scavenger hunt, you can pull people into a cult very quickly. And a lot of these conspiracy theories are built on this, concept. But it's
the whole idea of the informed minority, the hidden knowledge. This is like from the Greeks, Gnosticism. This kind of the Eleusinian mysteries. I forget what it's called, but like that was all, you're initiated, and it's us versus them. Like we know stuff. This is what it was like to be gay back in the day. It's like you pass, but the two guys in the street would recognize each other, but no one else knew.
And that's why so many of those conspiracy theories stick, because people get roped into solving the mystery. And Walter Kern talks about this with the Luigi thing, about like, oh, you got the audience to get in on the whodunit and follow the bike path and this and that. So like now it's just, it really gets locked in. It goes back to the ambiguity thing with hypnosis.
And the status thing. I know something that all these normies out there don't. They're so dumb, therefore I'm smart. Mm-hmm. It could be that you're all dumb or they're smart about something, you're dumb about that. You know what I mean? But people don't think like that.
Totally that way. I sincerely hope we get to do this again. We didn't even get to talk about, I want to hear an update from you about how the foray into stand-up comedy is going. There are very few
little bits. It takes too much time.
Oh, so you gave up on it?
Kinda, yeah. I have my set, but it's just like putting myself out there is it's grueling. And I like my house. All my stuff is here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I said there are just like a couple of moments or posts or things that'll stick with me over the years. And one of the funniest things I've ever seen is when you were talking with Dave Smith and had the gumption to ask him live on an interview if he would listen to some of your material. And he just flat up said, no.
I know, it's so great. I love that. Billy Idol had this quote. I remember the exact quote. And this does not apply here because me and Dave are boys. But he said something like, I love when people insult me because then I can stop pretending to be nice. Although that means I don't have to be nice anymore. It's so great. I love that too. Yeah.
Ever since that clip, and I think about it sometimes because it's just funny to think about, and your reaction to it was perfect. You thought it was hysterical, but I've thought about it since then and thought, did he ever go and do it? Did he ever go try a set? And
I've done a set several times, and
do you like it?
Also, I'm sorry to spoil the fun of that anecdote. Previous to that, Dave had invited me to open for him if I'd wanted to. So it was very much said in a loving way. And here's the other thing. If I open for Dave and I bomb, that's hilarious too. You know what I mean? It'd be hilarious for the audience who all know who I was, because me and Dave, have a big overlap in many ways. So yeah, you know what? That's just one last thing. I talked to several big shot comics for advice. And the one commonality that they all had, they all said you have to bomb. You're not a stand up until you're on stage and no one's, it's not landing, and you know it's not landing, and they know it's not landing, and it's just you and that mic. And if you can't handle that, pack it up and go home because it's going to happen to you. It happens to all of us. And I thought that was really interesting and good advice. And it hasn't happened to me yet, but I only did a few times.
I've read that from every single comic, every biography, even like people
Yeah.
like Jerry Seinfeld have said it, and that's one of the reasons why I none of it just didn't bother. Like I can write jokes all day, but there's a lot of ways that I can embarrass myself without purposely going on stage and doing it on purpose, right? So like that's one reason why I just said, yeah, I don't
My,
think I need
my
that.
favorite comic, Neil Hamburger, has a bunch of one liners when they don't land, such as, would that have been funnier if there was a black choir behind me?
Or someone like Norm Macdonald who could do it, like
Yeah.
and just like he would find that hilarious. He had a lot of, I think, the troll in him. That's like, oh, this
Well,
is
when he did
hilarious.
that
I'm
roast of
killing.
Bob, well, he did that
Yes.
roast of Bob Saget. He did these jokes, like retirement party jokes, and the comics on the dais were on the floor peeing their pants, and the audience was just staring. And that is the trolling. That's exactly where you want to be. That sweet spot where like the people who get it, and the people who don't get it. But it wasn't for you. Like one of the things I'm against in our our consumers culture is this idea that everything has to be for everyone. It doesn't. And if it's not for you or for me or for anybody listening to this, that doesn't inherently mean it's bad. It could be bad, but it could be just not your thing, and that's fine.
On that note, Michael Malice, thank you so much for the conversation. I would love to do it again in maybe 6 months or so. We'll get some more material. We'll maybe try some of our own stand-up stuff back and forth and see who really sucks at it. And I could probably top your Malcolm Jamal Warner joke, but not now. Not. I've rebranded myself, obviously, on the Twitter platform I was saying before we started recording. I was on years and years and years when it first launched. I'm no longer on that account. But there's times when I think, oh, I could really do some damage here, but it would just be really bad for the persuasion hypnosis brand. And what
There's one I recently didn't tweet, which was, look at it this way. At least we know Nancy Guthrie isn't getting raped, probably.
I'm not gonna laugh. Mm. So on that note, let that be your welcome. Oh no, wait! I had to do you the honor of asking, as you do at the end of your show. What was your favorite part of the interview?
Um, my favorite part of the interview was you validating that I'll, because I'm stumbling in the dark. I'm not a professional. I don't have a background in any of this cognition stuff. That many of these things that I have concluded and deduced have are grounded in things that people have learned and studied, and my hypotheses may not be original to me, but actually are kind of been understood and are valid. So that really was really good to hear.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Mousetraps are real. Thank you, Michael Malice. We'll see you next time.
Yes, sir.